All right, folks, it is 1:30. Welcome to today's Ken Reeves Memorial Weather Briefing. It is the last day of February, which is hard to believe, although I will say, coming in here this morning, it was bright pretty early, so definitely starting to see the signs of the season change, but we're not quite done with winter yet. But I'll lead forecasting to Ben, and Ben, without further ado, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And I promise I did not bribe Kevin in any way to say that lead-in he just had, because that very much leads in nicely to what I have prepared for the start of today's briefing. So thank you, inadvertently. Anyone who is watching who doesn't know me, my name is Ben Reppert. I'm sort of a third-timer state college centric person. I got my undergraduate degree from Penn State in 2015. Then I left briefly and came back to work in the department until late 2018. Then I left again, and I just recently came back. I work now over in the EES building. Any of you on campus, I'm basically right next to the tall tower cranes that are uncomfortably close outside my window. So hopefully nothing comes crashing through in the next half hour. But in any case, Kevin prefaced it. We are at the end of February, which also means we are at the end of meteorological winter. So March and meteorological spring both arrive tomorrow. I'm just slightly tweaking the terminology. I'm calling it meteorological winter, because it really wasn't, at least in most statistical standpoints, it wasn't much excitement in any spectrum of the coin here. January, I think we'll all remember, in at least State College and most of Pennsylvania as a whole, that was the most exciting of the 3-month period in terms of, any sort of wintry weather. I'm going to go through some of the stats here to sort of round up meteorological winter in State College. As far as on the whole, the average temperature came out to be about 3 degrees Fahrenheit above the long-term average. It placed it 20th warmest overall. What was interesting, though, and anyone who's been in State College for a length of time recently knows that largely our relative warmth around here is driven more so, at least recently, by overnights and the minimums in terms of the maximums. The interesting thing that I found with this winter, though, it was 10th warmest by all the highs averaged together and only 43rd warmest when you averaged all the lows. So at least going back, through the recent 10 to 20 year period or so, that was a bit different than I may have expected, going into the winter. If you would have told me it was the 20th warmest winter in State College, I would have thought that would be driven largely by the lows and not the highs. But this winter was a little bit different in terms of that. Precipitation, when you combine the rain and the sleet and the melted snow, 9.27 inches. That was the 36th wettest in the period of record. And just the winter itself, so meteorologically speaking, December 1st to the end of February, 17.7 inches. That was the 24th least snowiest winter, December, January, February, in the period of record. So certainly not one of the more exciting meteorological winters snow-wise. But in just a moment, I'll actually look ahead and we'll try to use history to say, could we be done? Are we done? Or is there a lot of hope left? How did we get to those winter stats, though? Well, December, we of course had the second warmest December on record. So as far as the winter stats go, if you were banking on a colder than average winter, December made it really tough to arrive at that. Second warmest on record, only 2.1 inches of snow, 2.3 inches of liquid. Neither of those were anything, terribly noteworthy. So the temperature in December was certainly the bigger story. Then January came, we changed the calendar to a new year. Generally speaking, got in on a new weather pattern. It was considerably colder than December. In terms of historically speaking, it came in as the 39th coldest January on record in State College, the coldest in 4 years since 2018. The more interesting thing, though, about January was just how much colder it was than the last couple of Januaries. So this January was over 6 degrees colder than last January and almost 9 degrees colder than January of 2020. So the last few years, we've started off the calendar year on a really warm note. This year, sort of the opposite. It was also our snowiest January in 7 years in State College, with over 13 inches of snow that fell. And so, 13 of that 17.7 for the entire winter season came in the month of January. So we really had those, wintry 4 or 5 weeks bookended by less so wintry weather patterns.
Hey, Ben.
February was the 39th warmest.
Um,
What's up?
yeah, sorry. For some reason, your screen is like not updating for everybody.
Oh,
Can you
hold on.
try? Maybe if you try to share again
that?
and do. Yeah. Okay. Good. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Oh no, you're fine. Thanks for stopping me. It'd be embarrassing go a whole 30 minutes without it coming along for the ride. So just get everyone caught up graphically speaking where we've been. So this is what I started out with. Again, this is the winter summary stats as a whole. About 3 degrees Fahrenheit above the long-term average, 20th warmest. It was uniquely recently largely driven by the daytimes or the maximums instead of the minimums. This is what I've been yammering through the last minute or so. So, after the relatively cold January, certainly the coldest January in the last several years and one of the snowier ones in the last several years, February came along, 39th warmest on record, only 2.5 inches of snow and sleet. Of course, most of that falling with the glacier that came just a few days ago. Interestingly enough, though, over 4.5 inches of liquid this February. That's the 4th wettest February in the reliable period of record. The caveat there, 1893 was a little wetter. So that being said, it would make it the 5th wettest. But in terms of if you start from 1895 to the present, when there's a little bit less missing data, it was the 4th wettest February on record. So a lot of liquid this month. So that's how we got to the winter that ended up being, when you consider the 3-month period, not really notable in any direction, but month to month, there were some notable aspects. It just sort of came out in the wash, so to speak, when you averaged it all together. So not that I'm a huge fan of looking at single analogs to hypothesize what might be coming down the road. I mean, in some instances, I still see the value in that, but forgive me for being a bit of a hypocrite here with what I'm about to do. I thought it might be interesting to know, this paltry snowfall amount that we're at so far. How common is that in the historical record at the end of February, and what might it mean going forward? So in terms of the cold season total, we're at 18.5 inches. So we had 17.7 for the 3 winter months, 0.8 from before meteorological winter started from November. So we're at 18.5. That's where we're sitting as we are set to begin meteorological spring. I was a little surprised that there were 19 other years to this point that had less. So we could be doing worse. So that 18.5 sits at the 20th least seasonal snowfall total to date. If we keep in mind the 30-year average for the entire season, it's about 43.8 inches now. So we need 25 inches and change to get to a normal seasonal snowfall total. So there's a lot of work to be done if we're hoping to get there. Can we get there? So that's the answer, or that's what I turn to history to try and figure out, is there hope for an average snow season in State College? Well, we're 20th least right now. So on the screen, those are the 19 other years that had less to this point in the season. A couple of recent ones. 2 years ago, we were doing worse than we are now. And even 6 years ago, we were doing worse to this point than we are now. So those are the 19 other years. And here's what has fallen in those years from March 1st through the rest of the cold season. There's quite a spread. Any longtime State College resident knows that March can be historically snowy around here still, and including some of our bigger snowstorms on record. March can certainly host some of those, and even into April, we can still get snow. But in those years where we basically got to the end of meteorological winter and we're doing very poorly, This is what happened from this point forward, anywhere from barely over an additional inch, the last two times it's happened, coincidentally, to as much as 32 inches back in 1916. So that's quite the range of outcomes. What this tells me is certainly we're probably not done with snow altogether. In none of these other years were we shut out the rest of the season. And in some years, it's still snowed quite a bit. Again, we need about 25 inches to get to a normal season. I highlighted in pink the only 2 years that had at least the 25 inches that we need. So that being said, as far as takeaways are concerned, I'd say it's fair to say we're not done with the snow. We'll probably at least see a little more. We could see a lot more. But as far as getting back to average, that's going to be tough from this point. Getting to the end of meteorological winter with only 18.5 inches, as far as in the period of record that we have, if we get to March 1st and we're sitting at a number that we're sitting at right about now, it's pretty hard to get back to an average seasonal snowfall total, which right now is about 44 inches. It's happened twice. If we had a year, or if we had a March and April like we had in 1916 and 1965, we could do it. But there are 17 other years here where that would argue we can't do it. And several of these years, in fact, 1, 2, 3, 8 of those years would argue that we could really struggle. You'll notice that there are quite a few years where we've only added an additional couple to few inches of snow to our seasonal total. So I don't think we're done with the snow. I think at this point, getting to an average snow season in State College is pretty much a lost cause. This is also the time of the year where obviously spring break is next week. It's March. It's the time of the year where we start to think about, it getting warmer, more sunshine, getting outside, doing some enjoyable things. So it's always also a good reminder to at least pump the brakes or proceed with caution, because while our minds are often on spring break and those warmer, sunnier days, as we also like to say around here, it can also be the time of the year of spring broke, because March does not often behave like the spring month that it gets associated with. Sometimes it can act a lot more like winter. So on the screen, these are the departures for the last 9 Marches from 2013 to 2021. And again, this is another one of those months where it can go one of two very different ways. It can be very much a spring-like month, or it can very much be an extension of winter. And we've certainly had no shortage of both of those over the last 9 years. Interestingly enough, the last 2 Marches have been quite warm compared to average for Pennsylvania and the Northeast as a whole. They've been more the exception in the last 9 years. More often than not, Marches in the last decade have tilted toward the cold side, and some of them uncomfortably so. March 2019, March 2018, and March 2015, those were 3 Marches that were much more like winter months, quite a bit of snow, and certainly well below average in temperature. And just, taking a step back and looking at what's on the screen in front of you, more of the Marches recently have been an extension of winter as opposed to more of a spring-like situation. And so I think it's fair to say that, I wasn't prepared to come today with, say, a detailed long-range forecast, but, both outcomes very much can happen and have happened in the past. Certainly, as we start out this week, as we'll talk about here in a few minutes, we're still going to be riding this temperature roller coaster that we've been on for much of the last several weeks. And some of the early indications are that potentially through the whole month of March, we're very much so going to be riding the temperature roller coaster. I think when we get to a month from now and we have to, see what the stats tell us, it will probably be a result of just if the ups are just a little more up than the down are downs. I think in the first half of the month, it seems pretty clear that while we are going to be on this roller coaster, it looks like the upside has some more potential than the downside. So as we adjourn for spring break here, and then by the time we all come back from spring break and March is half over, I'd be willing to bet that our temperature anomaly will have a positive sign in front of it, that the ups will be a little more up than the downs will be down in the next 1 to 2 weeks. But certainly historically, and especially within the last 10 years, we've had a wide variety of outcomes during the month of March. A couple of other things about March. One of the more exciting aspects of it is the increase in daylight. We will be gaining about 2 hours we'll be gaining about 2 minutes and 40 seconds of daylight each day. So tomorrow, the average high is 40, the average low is 24. We have 11 hours and 17 minutes of daylight. And for any WeatherCom members on here, I would not be forgiven if I did not say this in how Paul Knight would say it. So 11 hours and 17 minutes of daylight for March 1st in State College. By the end of the month, the average high jumps up to 52. The average low is above freezing, 33, and we've got 12 hours and 39 minutes of daylight with a sunset at 7:36. So whatever March is going to deliver us weather-wise, we can at least bank on the fact that we will be gaining a lot of daylight. And a month from now, sunset 7:30, I think we'll take it. Average monthly snowfall is about a little over 9 inches. Last year, March 2021, only a trace. The record for the snowiest March is back in 1942, when it was just about 4 feet of snow that fell during the month. So that also argues for how March can very much be an extension of a winter month, or can behave a lot more spring-like. The interesting tidbit with this too, in the period of record since 1895, State College has never gone 2 Marches in a row without measuring snow. So that's another one of those arguments, or that also feeds into my argument that we are not done with the snow yet. And the fact that we only had a trace last year and we've never gone 2 Marches in a row without measuring snow, I think that also argues that we'll see some snow this March. Maybe not a lot. Certainly there are limited opportunities in the week ahead to add to our paltry seasonal total. We could have some snowflakes falling at least before this week is over. So that's sort of my winter wrap up. As far as looking ahead a little bit, I'm going to reshare my screen here in just a moment. Maybe. Okay. So one of the first things I like to, something I like to add into my forecasting, portfolio when trying to look ahead as far as, a little bit longer term, I'll often take a glance at the MJO. This is tropical forcing down, generally straddling the equator, and it basically tracks where the most active thunderstorms are and whether they're, closer to the maritime continent, the Indian Ocean, the Western Pacific, or over near Africa. So that's it's often associated with waves in the tropics, and how that affects where the forcing is for the best thunderstorm activity. And this is one of those teleconnections that sometimes where the best forcing is in the tropics for thunderstorms, that can often, correlate pretty well with weather patterns elsewhere around the globe, including here in the United States. Recently, the MJO has been spending a lot of time here in the center part of the diagram, which is affectionately referred to as the circle of death. And when it does that, that often means that there's not this great correlation between the MJO and long-range weather forecasts. So it hasn't been very helpful in terms of helping pinpoint upcoming weather patterns recently. There's some indication that if the MJO was going to be headed any direction coming up, it might be over toward phases 3 and 4. For what it's worth, if it were to head in the direction of phase 3 and 4 at this time of the year, centered on February, March, April, with March being the middle. Phase 3, historically speaking, is more of a cool phase for much of the US, actually. Phase 4 is much more correlated to being a warm phase for much of the United States, minus the northern part of the country. But again, because the MJO is largely going into the circle of death, or staying in the circle of death, we're not, can't really count on it to be much of a signal for where we're going from here. While I'm on the Climate Prediction Center website, the next 1 to 2 weeks, there's some pretty good signals that the eastern United States is going to be more often than not favoring warmth, and that the cooler air is going to be plunging first into the Rockies and the West Coast. We're going to be in a weather pattern coming up where, the rest of this week, we're still going to be on this temperature roller coaster. We're going to have some clippers coming through that reinforce the cold air. Early next week, though, it seems that there's going to be a decent storm system that organizes in the central part of the country and tracks to our north and west, which will help yield this milder pattern come late this weekend, early next week. As we look a little farther out, toward the 8 to 14 day outlook, this implies that warmth will be in the process of getting squashed a little bit, and some of this cooler air that was first dumping into the western part of the United States, it might be trying to come eastward. And so that's what our friends at the Climate Prediction Center are hanging their hat on for the next couple of weeks. For anybody who doesn't know, the Climate Prediction Center also has this experimental week 3 to 4 outlook, which in the department, our very own Dr. Feldstein had a hand in helping with some of the research that went into this. Right now, the Climate Prediction Center for that 3 to 4 week time period, at least issued a few days ago, hanging their hat on the warm signal for much of the southern half of the United States, potential for that little bit of a cool signal up across the northern tier. One thing that is consistent, though, around here is a wetter than average signal. Whether you look at the 6 to 10 day period, the 8 to 14 day period, or the 3 to 4 week period, the eastern US is consistently in a wetter than average signal, or at least the Ohio Valley and the northeastern part of the United States. So if there's anything to say more for certain over the next few weeks, it's probably that there's going to be a fair number of opportunities for precipitation around here. Question is, can it time up with some cold air to fall in the form of any snow? Are we mostly talking about some wetter systems that bring a lot of rain and we turn cold behind them? That's what we're going to have to work to figure out over the next few weeks. But I think there's a lot that is pointing in the direction of a wetter weather pattern around here to come along with this temperature roller coaster of sorts. While we're on the page, what do our CPC friends like for March as a whole? Well, they've got warm signal dominating the eastern United States, cool up north and west. For what it's worth, this forecast was issued about 10 days ago, so this is not a recently issued outlook. But at least as of 10 days ago, our friends at the Climate Prediction Center were liking a warm signal for the eastern U.S., cool in the northwest, and there's that above average precipitation signal that they had identified as early as about 2 weeks ago from the Ohio Valley and up into our neck of the woods. As far as, gotta get my zoom bar out of the way here. As far as what's coming in the near future, we're going to have a parade of clippers the next few days go by to our north and gradually keep temperatures from getting a little too high this week. So before we adjourn for the break, and whether we're going back to see family or elsewhere next week, before we get to that point, we're on the up and down this week. So if we start out, this is tomorrow morning. This is the GFS. Here on the pressure image here in the center upper middle panel, you can see the hint of one of these clippers going by to our north. That's going to first bring a warm front through here. So as we head into the day tomorrow, into the middle part of the week, we're going to be turning warmer than we are today. Of course, it's pretty chilly outside today. But as we head into tomorrow, we are going to get this little burst of warmth to get in here out ahead of this first front coming through with a clipper going by to our north. That goes by. Generally speaking, this is a moisture-starved system. So as this goes by to our north, most of the energy and most of the moisture associated with this will be passing by to our north. But as the front comes through, we could get in on a few rain and snow showers late tomorrow into early Wednesday, but it does not look like anything appreciable. In the wake of that, there's no rest for the weary in the Clipper department because another one is waiting in the wings to go by to our north toward the end of the week, more like late Wednesday into Thursday. Once again, it's largely moisture starved. But once again, in the wee hours of Thursday morning, there can be some light rain showers and light snow showers that pass through. Best chance to see any sort of snow showers that could coat the ground or leave a light accumulation would be north and west of State College, more like the northwestern part of the state, the Allegheny Plateau, Wellsboro, Bradford, Meadville, the usual suspect areas in a case like this. After that second Clipper goes by to our north, we got a reinforcing shot of some cold air to end this week, and also some breezy conditions too on Thursday until high pressure settles in by Friday. Friday at this point looks like a pretty decent day around here. You know, if anyone is traveling for spring break or even just heading back to see family, if you're remotely close to Pennsylvania or in the immediate area, the Mid-Atlantic, New England, even the Great Lakes, this is a pretty respectable looking travel situation. Big high parked overhead. Sure, it looks to be a little on the chilly side, but this would ensure that not a lot of active weather is going to be going on very close to home here. So good in that regard if you are doing any traveling on Friday or to start off the weekend. Then beyond this, late in the weekend, early next week, this is the situation that also lends some weight to that CPC pattern for that 6 to 10 day time frame. So over the weekend, the long wave trough is very prevalent over the western part of the United States. This is also helping to direct the next shot of colder air first into the Rockies, into the Intermountain West. So if it were going to come our way by later next week, it's very much so doing it via the scenic route. So by the time we get to this weekend, we're talking about all this energy that is diving into the west. That should start to help a storm organize near the Front Range of the Rockies. So by the time we get to this weekend, you know, there's likely going to be a snowstorm going on somewhere in the northern Rockies and the northern plains. And then the large scale pattern would promote some sort of storm system going by to our north and west late weekend or early next week. Probably keeps us on the warm side of this particular storm. Verbatim, at least the GFS right now has a warm front going through here Sunday into Monday. Could have some showers associated with it, but again, if things don't change too much over the next few days, upper level low going by to our north and west, that's fueling a surface low that is also going by well to our north and west. That would put us in the warm sector early next week. Again, should this pattern materialize remotely close to how it's advertised here on the GFS, you know, verbatim, this, at least for anyone sticking around State College, this might give us a glimmer of hope for a spring-like day in there, you know, early next week, Monday, Tuesday. 850 millibar temperatures are popping above 10 degrees Celsius. And so I'm at least looking at this and having some hope that early next week we could at least get one spring-like day in here before this cold front approaches from the west and could very much end it as quickly as it got here. But again, verbatim, this would drag a cold front through here, could come with some showers, almost surely of a liquid variety if we get that warm up out ahead of it, before some of that cooler air behind the front would come in behind this system. So as far as the pattern over the next week or so, it seems like, you know, Clipper parade the next few days, And then it wouldn't be until late in the weekend or early next week that a more notable system could start to affect us. But even so, if it really does track that far to our north and west, we'd probably only be dealt another passing cold front with that, with some rain and cooler air to follow. So as far as what that looks like on surface map depiction, here's that weak system going by to our north by later tomorrow. There's the warm front that will be coming through here early in the day tomorrow. So tomorrow's a milder day than it is today. Very quickly, though, cold front will come through in the wake of that system passing by to our north. So that'll work to knock us back once again into tomorrow night. My Zoom bar is very much in the way of where I need to be. So again, later tomorrow, Clipper goes by to the north, milder day, then a cold front goes through. Then by the time we get to later Wednesday into Thursday, as another Clipper goes by to the north, we basically run into this same pattern where we warm up briefly again. That cold front that comes through late Wednesday into Thursday does look to be the stronger one. So that's why at the end of this week, we actually do get that shot of some cooler air. One other thing that I just remembered I had pulled up to help illustrate that, this is a website that is, this is run by Tomer Berg. I'm sure that name sounds familiar to at least some of you in the Twitter sphere. He's a graduate student, but he has some very helpful plots on his website, which if you Google Tomer Berg weather, this will come up. For what it's worth, his website is, it's very complicated. So the easier search by far is Tomer Berg weather. I like to look at his website because he does a lot of things with percentiles. So it helps to pinpoint if something is particularly anomalous. So whether it's temperature, whether it's pressure or heights or precipitable water, to get an idea if a system might be, you know, very moisture laden compared to what is typical in a certain area. I like some of the products that he has on his website. So I pulled this up just in terms of temperature, because I think this helps to provide a pretty nice visual of, you know, where air masses are particularly anomalous at any given time. Once again, I'm just using the GFS here. This is valid pretty much right now. Anywhere that is highlighted in blue, you're starting to get to the, you know, the colder percentiles. You know, the purple colors, if they were ever to show up, that is the record lowest 850 millibar temperature at a given place. You know, the darkest blue, you're in the top or the bottom 1%, I guess. And if you're in at least any shade of blue, it's top 10% cold, in this case 850 millibar temperature. So right now we are in the process of getting a anomalously cold 850 millibar air mass to leave. It's in the process of scooting east. So over the next couple of days, if we just drag this forward, now we're into tomorrow afternoon. It's milder than it was today. We get that anomalous chill to scoot off to the east. Off to our west, you know, the western United States, the next few days, they're going to be basking in warmth. Denver's got a place near and dear to my heart. And, you know, they had 120 hours sub-freezing that just ended a couple of days ago. They're going to be back in the mid 60s by tomorrow afternoon. So that's quite the string, or that's quite the flip there underneath what will be a building warm air mass to our west. It never really will get the opportunity to get in here. By Wednesday afternoon, you know, anomalous warmth is invading the plains. We could have gotten in on some of that if this next Clipper was not going by to our north. So by the time we get to Thursday, that warmth is stuck in the plains. We get this reinforcing shot of some cold air that comes in here, so that by the time we get to late Thursday and Friday, at least at 850 millibars, you know, we've got a top 10% cold air mass for this time of the year that has re-infiltrated Pennsylvania. So while it will be quiet, it will be chilly to end this week. So that's why at least good travel from that standpoint, if anyone is leaving town. And then as we get into early next week, this is that situation that I was describing before. If we get an area of low pressure to go through the plains into the Great Lakes to our west, that would put much of the eastern United States in the warm sector. And again, at least verbatim off of the latest GFS run, by next Monday, we've got a top 5% warm air mass at 850 that is modeled to come in here. And so again, this is 7 days out. The details of this at this point are largely unknown, or the most specifics, but there's certainly growing confidence that early next week, with a storm going by to our west, there will be a warm air mass that can get drawn northward into the mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, and if all the cards line up right, it could be quite warm for this time of the year. At least at 850, we could be talking about, top 5 to, in some spots, maybe top 1% warm air mass for this time of the year. Meanwhile, the cold air gets dumped into the west. Last thing I wanted to touch on that I had pulled up was to wrap this back into what I started with. Is there any hope for, a pattern out there that would promote more notable snow? Certainly in the next 7 days, I think the answer is very clearly no. Beyond that, the long-range ensembles provide maybe a glimmer of hope. So I'm just going to fast forward here a little beyond early next week, say closer to the time that spring break is ending and we all may be regathering in State College. This is valid March 11th. So again, this is way out there. This is 10, 11 days. So the specifics are largely unknown. But the ensembles, the 30 members of the GFS ensemble at least, this pattern of trough in the west, some evidence of a southeast ridge in the east, that's still showing up. What is of interest though, all of these low heights to our north, so Pennsylvania is here at the tip of my cursor. I can zoom in a little farther to make this easier. Pennsylvania is here where my cursor is, very much in at least the hint of a ridge in the eastern US, trough in the west. But to our north, in eastern Canada, where all of these lines are sort of coming together, that's what we refer to as confluence or a confluence zone. A pattern like this would at least support high pressure in eastern Canada or southeast Canada. And a pattern like this too would also promote more of these storms, originating in the southwest and tracking toward the northeast. That to me at least is a signal for overrunning. And around here, March, especially because it can still behave more like a winter month, I would be at least starting to think that, later next week or 10 to 14 days from now, we could very much be in a pattern that would promote some more overrunning events, similar to perhaps what we had last week, where you've got a cold area of high pressure that can build in southeast Canada or northern New England, and a storm, tracking to our west, certainly unfavorable to keep things all snow. But nevertheless, a storm system that is tracking towards us and toward an area that has cold air in place. So next 7 days, I wouldn't bank on there being much wintry weather around here, aside from some snow showers, potentially both Tuesday night into Wednesday with the first clipper, Wednesday night into Thursday with the second clipper. Other than that, no big wintry risks in the next week. Beyond the next week, I think the next thing to potentially hang our hat on would be a pattern that promotes overrunning out around, or at least closer to the middle of the month. So the weekend that is basically the end of spring break, when we all may be returning. There's some multi-model support. The GFS ensembles have a pattern like this. The European ensembles are hinting at a similar pattern that could promote some overrunning. So I hold by my my claim that I don't think March will go snowless again, because we've never had 2 in a row without measurable snow. But ultimately, for the first chance of getting more appreciable wintry weather back in here, I think we're waiting probably about 10 to 14 days till we can get into more of a pattern like this that's got some overrunning potential with it. So that being said, that is all I came prepared with today. I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone's had. I don't know if anyone's been posting in the chat or if anyone wants to ask a question that's on the call, but happy to take any.
Yeah, I think everybody should be able to chat. I don't think that's disabled. So anybody has any questions, by all means, send it in the chat. I'm definitely excited for a little bit of warmth. I mean, I know we're not, you're saying it now. I hope you're right at the same time that we're not done with winter, but at the same time, I'm kind of done with the 10-degree temperature.
Yeah, that's fair. If it didn't drop into the single digits again, I certainly would not be upset.
You wouldn't find me complaining.
I certainly would not be upset if we did not do that again before this winter is done.
You see what Rob said? I'm also going to add, I like that site. A lot of useful things.
Oh yeah, I wonder if, for what it's worth, anyone that's at least in the chat. I guess, did that go through? Did that go through to just you, Kevin? I don't know. Whoops.
Yeah, it was just me.
There, that went to everyone. Yeah, for anyone in here, that hyperlink there will at least take you to the product that I just showed in this. But yeah, I think that's a great website, especially, like I say, I use it for looking at percentiles, especially. It's just a nice, easy way to pinpoint, things that are anomalously warm, cold, wet, or if a storm system's getting particularly strong, there's a pressure percentile one on there too, where it'll help pinpoint, like, yeah, this is a really intense low pressure system for this part of the country in the historical record. So yeah, it's another great weather resource that can certainly be added to a forecaster's repertoire.
Alrighty, awesome stuff. If nobody else has anything, I guess we can go ahead and end it. Thank you so much, Ben, for doing this. I appreciate it. Always
Absolutely.
happy to have. Yeah, so this video was recorded. It's going to be on YouTube at some point later today. Hopefully, it depends when Kaltura decides to send it to me. So
sure.
Yeah.
And
all right, good stuff.
Appreciate the invitation, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ben. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you for coming.